We are looking at a quintessential Maine scene. The lobstermen seem to be pretty much done for the day, but they have hauled in their catch on an early fall morning on the Damascotta River. Fishing this resource is older than the state itself, and it remains one of the iconic images and activities that define Maine. There's a lot being done to ensure the future for the lobster fishery, that it remains strong into the future along with other maritime traditions. But it is an interesting time for Maine's marine and coastal environment, the people who make their living there, and the creatures that live there. Great opportunities and some significant threats make this an exciting and challenging time. We are at the Darling Marine Center in Walpole, UMaine's coastal campus, where research and classes take place on Maine's marine environment. It is an amazing living laboratory for this work, and we're here to talk about it all. And with that, we welcome in our guests. So glad to have you here. Not a bad place to be on a early fall afternoon. So maybe let's go around, have you introduce yourself, just say your name and your title and a little bit of the backstory. Why are you drawn to the ocean? Why are you drawn to the work that you're doing? What made you say, this is what I want to do with my life? Let's start, Chris, we'll start with you.
Great. Hi, my name is Chris Cash. I'm the Executive Director of the Lobster Institute. I come to this position by being a commercial fisherman. I had my own lobster boat for 8 years. I fished for lobster off of Monhegan Island. But I participated in a variety of other fisheries, including ground fishing and tuna fishing. Best job ever, tuna fishing. But I come to it from my family. I like to say I'm obnoxiously from Maine. My family's both sides have been here since the 1600s, and many members of my family participated in the lobster fishery and the seining fishery and other fisheries throughout generations. Most recently, my grandfather out of Yarmouth, Maine. And when I couldn't fish any longer due to injury and I saw this job come along, it was just this most amazing combination of my skill set, having been in Maine and in the nonprofit world, but really missing the lobster fishery and the industry, and just feel really lucky to be able to kind of blend the two and be at my alma mater at UMaine. Yeah,
the best of both worlds. Kurt, how about you? What's your story?
My name is Kurt Brown. I'm a lobsterman from Cape Elizabeth, Maine, and also a marine biologist at Ready Seafood Company, which is based in both Portland and Saco. And I found my way into this world when I started lobstering right around 8 years old.
Wow.
As an 8-year-old, I can assure you there's nothing more magical than seeing lobster traps come up from the bottom of the ocean full of lobsters and crabs and all these other amazing critters. And it was being out on the water through childhood that really sparked my interest in marine science and what was going on under the ocean surface. The day after I graduated from college with degrees in biology and history, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had been accepted to an internship right here at the Darling Center. And I remember driving down the dirt road right here at the Darling Center and just being overwhelmed by the beauty and majesty here and realizing, okay, this is a place I want to spend more time at, and have been able to do that over the last 20 years. It's been a while. And I'm really privileged to be back here today. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Now, you're known as William Ellis, but nobody calls you that. So we're going to call you by the name everybody uses with you, which is Weege.
Which is just for my initials. So I grew up as William G. Ellis Jr. My dad went by Bill, and I got Weege.
Okay.
So if you hear about Weege, that's me. I'm the Associate Director of the School of Marine Sciences and an Associate Professor of Oceanography. And I guess my story is I'm not a Mainer. I can't go back to the 1600s, but moved to Maine when I was 9. Grew up in East Vassalboro, and I've loved being in Maine ever since. And for me, it was I took a scuba diving course when I was 15 years old, and then I found an old beat-up surfboard in a barn, bought that, and I just thought the ocean was magical. Went on to college, majored in chemistry, and I didn't know what. I said, how can you use a chemistry degree and connect it to the ocean? And I had an advisor in college that said, chemical oceanography is a field. And then I ended up just really enjoying teaching and working with students, and I've become more administrative over the years.
Great. Damien, what's your story?
Yeah, I'm Damian Brady. I'm the Agatha B. Darling Professor in the School of Marine Sciences at the University of Maine, and work right here at the Darling Marine Center. I did not grow up in Maine. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I took an internship at the aquarium in Coney Island and fell in love with marine science, and I ended up narrating for 3 seasons at the aquarium, doing the dolphin show and the sea lion show and saying, welcome to the aquarium for wildlife conservation.
You have a voice for that.
So I fell in love with it. Went to college for marine science, and then my wife is from Maine. So when I got my degree, I said, "Where do you want to go next?" And I've never met a Mainer who didn't want to get home.
Right.
So she came here, and it turned out to be a fantastic decision for me too.
Great. Well, there's so much we could talk about here. I wish we had more time, and there's so many issues, from the health of the ecosystem, traditional fisheries, new technologies, climate change. But maybe let's start with, and whoever wants to chime in, sort of a big picture assessment, sort of recent history, your thoughts around that, around marine issues, and the blue economy and where it may be headed. Maybe we should define first. What do we think? What is the definition of the blue economy? Whoever wants to take that on.
I can take the first swing at the blue economy because it's a really big term, right? Like we throw blue in front of everything, and so I think for us in Maine, right, it includes fisheries, it includes aquaculture, it includes the development of offshore wind and renewable energy from the ocean. One thing that we can't forget, that it also includes trade and navigation, right? So everything that is in the ocean that affects our economy in some way, shape, or form, right? And so I think one of the exciting things about doing this work in Maine, Maine, sometimes we forget we have 3,500 miles of tidal shoreline. We have more tidal shoreline in Maine than California, for instance, right? And so we are the blue economy, right? The whole state, right? Whether it's our tourism economy, whether it's the largest fishery in North America, we're in the top 5 in marine aquaculture revenue production in the state, and potentially the site of some of the first floating offshore wind development in this hemisphere, right? So in some ways, picking apart what Maine is and where the blue economy ends is really difficult.
It's just such an iconic part of the state, along with forests. I mean, those are the two features that define Maine in many ways. Yeah. Anybody else want to take a crack at that? Biggest pressure points, biggest opportunities, coastal communities, how are they faring right now? Kurt, what do you think?
Tough following up, Damien, as always. But when I think of the blue economy, and you think of Maine, the two are really in parallel with each other. You think of Maine and you think of the iconic lobster fishery, but one of the things that excites me most is everything that's going on outside of lobster. There's so much innovation in aquaculture in different fisheries, and it's really that Maine work ethic that translates into all these innovative new products that are just being introduced to the market. And so while it is a very traditional industry, and it can be, some of the most important innovations are happening right here along the coast in the blue economy, and so the future is very bright.
So talk about some of those either products or technologies. What's new? We're talking seaweed, eels, power. That's one that you wouldn't think of, but now with offshore wind a possibility. Where are we on the sort of the transition from traditional to some of these new technologies? I mean, we're always going to have a little of both, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you talk about the marine economy in Maine, there's a saying that goes, the only constant is change. Mm-hmm. And if you go back 200 years, it was groundfish and that epic fishery that brought people from Europe and was really the backbone of, this country as a whole. And over time, that has changed for a variety of reasons, and lobster is the big player in town right now, but we're seeing more and more small businesses grow up along the coast, oysters, mussels, kelp. So many different species are being grown right here by small business owners that, have to be innovative to survive. And it's just been so exciting to see that happen, and how the university is really playing a role in their growth and development over time.
Well, so let's talk about that while we're here. The Darling Marine Center, we talked about, that's where we are, Weege.
Yep.
And you have the Semester by the Sea program, so marine science students spend at least a semester down here. They're on the water probably every day. Tell us sort of what do those students experience when they're down here?
Well, the first thing you have to do, so part of my job is the undergraduate coordinator. I do a lot of the recruiting for the university, and students are looking at lots of different institutions that have the waterfront. They have their campus has the waterfront. If you look at a map, Orono is not on the coast. So, what do we sell about our undergraduate program? And we're nationally recognized at this point for our undergraduate program in marine science. And this facility right here where we're sitting right now is what I call the jewel in our crown, because this is where the students get access to the waterfront. So, we've got to convince them to come meet our 25 amazing faculty. A lot of it's Orono based, but yes, we run a semester by the sea program. I think the dorm was built down here in 1998. So since that time, we've had the ability to have students in residence here, dining facility. And so now we've completely filled that dorm in the fall, and we're excited to announce that this spring we'll have a spring version of Semester by the Sea. So what I like to say now is we're going to have undergraduate students here 12 months a year, because in the summer we have anywhere from 10 to 30 interns in the summer. So this is going to become a thriving community for undergraduates and an amazing opportunity for them to be in the field, hands-on on the boats, and getting that experience that you would expect and hope to get in an undergraduate program. So exciting time for the economy, exciting time for undergrads. We really do have one of the nation's top programs, and we have a diving program. Students can become certified scuba divers, take scientific diving as a 3-credit course. So this is an amazing opportunity for our students. A lot of interest in this major right now. We're pushing 300 students in the undergraduate program, wow. And 80 to 85% of those students are coming from out of state. They're coming from very far away to get this education right here.
Damien, you're here on a daily basis, so you know the research and all what the folks are doing, the faculty, but now the students are added into the mix of what you have going on down here. It's a pretty lively place, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I will say that I think those two things are related, right? I mean, I think having 30, undergrads, here in the dorm, they're fantastic to bring them into the research experience, right? So, Tuesday, I had my oceanography class for the day, and we took a cruise out into the Gulf of Maine. And there's some pretty heavy wave action, right? The students are holding on to the back of the boat. Water's coming over the stern of the boat, right? And the really nice thing is I have them all day, right? So I'm not worried that if our cruise goes a little late in the Gulf of Maine, they're going to miss calculus in the afternoon, right? So I have them from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and so you can do things you just can't do in any other context, right? And I will say that the data they've collected on cruises like this go on to become a National Science Foundation funded project or a NOAA funded project or USDA, right? So the research and the education of undergrads are really, really tied together here.
Let's talk about the lobster industry. So maybe we'll turn to you guys for
Okay.
that. What is the state of the lobster fishery and the economy? What are the threats? What are the trends, the opportunities, new products? Is this fishery? I know it's a huge part of the overall seafood catch. Is Maine's seafood business reliant too much on lobster? What do you guys think?
You want to start it off, Chris?
I guess I can. Well, I mean, it is we're very heavy on lobster. That's for certain. It is. We are catching 80% of all the lobsters in the United States are coming from the state of Maine, and it has become, a very dependent. Most of our fishermen are dependent on the lobster fishery one way or another. But the really exciting thing is all of this diversity, which Kurt already touched on, was that we have these programs are more and more coming on board of opportunities where fishermen can diversify, whether that's with kelp or their own aquaculture or oysters, etc. So and it's really exciting to be a part of that and see that growing and trying to be helpful and instrumental in was talking with pretty frustrated fishermen down east last week, and the process is still kind of clunky on how they can get the approval for leases and such. But hopefully we can help be a part of that solution. Right now, the industry that is really healthy, thanks in part for years, decades, century of really good management by the lobster industry itself. Our interns this summer did a timeline of the management from 1820 to today, and it was really enlightening to me. I was not aware of all of these closed areas that they had by port or areas for biological concerns of when lobsters molted. So I learned a lot from my interns this summer. I was very grateful. But just to say how dynamic and how really invested the fishermen have been in conserving the fishery, that has gotten into a place where it's still really healthy, even though it is on this sort of monodependence in a big way. There's a lot going on economically. There's a lot going on coming up with regulation. But I'll let Kurt chime in before I go any further on
Yeah, what would you add? Can you be just a lobster fisherman anymore? Can you afford not to know the research and the trends that are out there, or be diversified and make it?
Yes, absolutely. So there's thousands of individual owner-operator harvesters up and down the coast whose main income is from the lobster fishery. You go to any coastal community east of Portland pretty much, and you'll see lobster boats and not much else. And most of those individuals, the majority of their income comes from lobster. And one of the things I love about lobster and the fishery and the industry is that you can get started at a very young age without a lot of capital going out and work your way up through the industry and make a go out of it and make a very good living. And ultimately, it's just such a fascinating fishery and industry. You have this hyper locally harvested product. I remember when I was in graduate school right here at the Darling Center, I brought a little skiff and a few traps up here just so I could afford peanut butter and jelly while I was a graduate student, and being very nervous because this is not my territory. And so it's a super hyper locally harvested product that then enters this fascinating global market. And we deal with that a lot at Ready Seafood. The live lobster market now is global. We have lobsters on commercial airliners right now going all over the world. Shanghai, Guangzhou, Paris, Madrid, Rome. All destinations for lobsters that are caught right here off the coast of Maine. And so that dynamic is really key, and there's not just opportunities out on the water, but you're talking about the entire supply chain where you have opportunities for careers in logistics or sales or purchasing or accounting and finance. It's really an amazing industry that is always changing, and it always keeps you on your toes. And like Chris said, the conservation ethic is really what has kept this a sustainable fishery for generations.
And as we are sitting here talking, we see is this Semester by the Sea right
so
here?
This is a class coming down. This is the marine microbiology class. So if I can just touch on for a second what Damien mentioned. I've worked at other institutions, and what is truly unique about Semester by the Sea is that the faculty do have the students for basically an 8-hour day. And like Damien said, there's no rush to get them back for a traditional academic day. So the statistic I like to quote is I think our students get more field time in one semester than some students might get in 4 years at an institution that's even on the water. Right. So so that noise in the background is a bunch of 20 or so eager students going to collect samples right off the dock next to us here.
Not a bad way to spend the day as opposed to being in a calculus class, like you mentioned.
Which we do make them do, but
and nothing against calculus. Right. And I just wanted to add something to what Kurt and Chris said, right? Because I think sometimes the narrative is, we're overly reliant on this one species. The flip side of that argument for me and what I've seen is that we have 5,000 license holders with 5,000 boats that have been trying all these other. We don't have a kelp industry without the lobster industry, right? Like we don't have a right now we've increased the sale of aquacultured scallops by 6-fold in the last 3 years. That does not happen without the fact that we have these lobster boats ready, and then we have a cold supply chain ready that you can put scallops into, you can put oysters into, you can put kelp into, because we have trucks that move from down east all the way to Ready Seafood, right, where the stuff can get processed. But we have without a robust lobster industry, we don't have the infrastructure actually for a lot of these other species that have been sort of popping up and increasing in the state.
Right. So kelp, oysters, scallops are sort of the icing on the cake of the lobster fishery.
And don't forget mussels.
Mussels. Okay. Right. So Damien, maybe you could talk a little bit about your work. How would you characterize the work that you look into with your research? How does energy production, offshore wind, climate change mitigation, some of these other issues, affect this, what is really a complex system?
Yeah, so I'll just touch on climate to start. For instance, Chris and I and others are working on a National Science Foundation funded project called Navigating the New Arctic, right, where we're trying to connect these huge changes that we're seeing in the Arctic to, as Kurt described it, this hyper-localized resource that we all need, right? So trying to connect something that's happening far away in the Arctic to what's happening in coastal communities in Maine can be really, really difficult. But we know that we've undergone a tremendous, really what we would call a regime shift, right? There was a Gulf of Maine before 2010, and there is a new Gulf of Maine after 2010. What's exciting about that research for me and others is really back to the fishermen, right? There are 5,000 lobstermen, or licensed lobstermen roughly in the state, and they all have 800 traps. And one of the really exciting pieces is that each of those 800 traps could be a way of monitoring for climate. So can we put low-cost temperature sensors on those? And the industry, I think a couple of people said it, there is a conservation ethic, right? It is in their best interest for the lobster industry to be really healthy. So they want to be plugged in to the experience of trying to monitor climate change, right? So we know what the future looks like. And so I think that's, and working at a land grant, sea grant university, a large public university, the ability to be applied and work in those coastal communities with the fishermen directly has been probably the best argument I can make for working at a place like UMaine and doing the kind of research we do.
Just to piggyback quickly on what Damien said, this time tomorrow I'll be out lobstering off the coast of Cape Elizabeth, and probably the most exciting part of my day tomorrow is hauling up a trap with a temperature sensor in it that I got through the university here, and that records the bottom temperature in real time. And when I haul that trap up, it connects to a box on my boat, it uploads all the data to that box and then to the cloud. And so every day that I haul that trap, I get a picture of what's going on down on the bottom. And that's the type of monitoring that without the lobster industry wouldn't happen. And it's given us some really amazing insights into what's happening right now in the Gulf of Maine. And I love the story with Chuck and him going on the Syracuse site and finding this slug of very cold, very fresh water here in the Gulf of Maine. And that's a harvester who's contributing to our understanding of what's going on. So a lot of synergies when it comes to science and industry, and that's all led by the university.
And I'll just add to that really quickly because it's sort of embarrassing for me, right? So Chuck Bennett, who is this lobsterman out of Sorrento,
Yep.
And Kurt put me in touch with him. He goes on the University of Maine's website to find out what's happening in our buoys that we deploy. We deploy as part of a system called the Northeast Regional Association of Coastal Ocean Observing Systems in Syracuse.
Well done.
We love our acronyms. Originally, it was called GOMOS, the Gulf of Maine Ocean Observing System, which was actually the first ocean observing system, one of the first ocean observing systems in the world deployed by UMaine. And he went on there. He found this water that, as Kurt described, was colder, fresher than we've ever seen. And we got a chance to meet with other oceanographers and find out it's this Scotian shelf water. So it's water from off of the Nova Scotian shelf that had come into the Gulf of Maine over the course of this winter and spring and really, really lowered the temperature during that period of time. But the fact that I was getting that from a lobsterman telling me like, hey, you should check this out, a little embarrassing, but really, really fun.
That's great. Kurt, you're on the front line, so you see changes happening to the climate and to the ocean. Everybody talks about, despite what you say, the Gulf of Maine is the fastest warming body of water in the world. Are you seeing major changes, significant things happening as a result of what's going on in the larger environment?
I think change is the key word there, and you ask any harvester anywhere in the world, and like I said before, they'll tell you the only constant is change, year in and year out. An old timer, Walter Day out on Vinyl Haven. I remember someone asked him, how do you think this year is going to shape up? And he said, well, ask me on January 1st of next year and I'll tell you. But it's that type of on-the-water curiosity. I mean, lobstermen are scientists day in and day out. Their hypotheses translate into their bottom line on a daily basis. And so climate change is certainly impacting the Gulf of Maine. I've seen species that we normally won't see from further south come up in my traps, everything from black sea bass to triggerfish to, I haven't caught one yet, but I hear all kinds of reports of blue crabs coming up in people's traps, and that's my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
If I ever had to pick blue crabs out of traps, I think I'd quit the next day. Those things are nasty. But every year is different, and a lot of it is unexpected. It's not a one-way trajectory towards a warmer Gulf of Maine. Like I said, this year has been a particularly cold year, and that has impacted landings in the molt cycle, and that really speaks to the value of science and monitoring and all the work that the university is doing with our industry. Lobster is the only game in town in a lot of these coastal communities, and without the lobster industry, the school would be gone, and then the community would be gone, and it would resemble northern Maine where they've lost a lot of the paper plants. And so that information that's being collected and monitored day in and day out, month in and month out, year after year, is so key, because that provides us with information as an industry that we can make informed decisions on. If we're going blind day in and day out without any of that information, then our end is pretty certain. But with that information, we can make decisions on whether we want to diversify our business into other opportunities in the blue economy. And it's just so fascinating. As someone who grew up here in Maine and loved lobstering and loved the ocean and wasn't a great student, I remember when it came time to pick a college, I wanted to get out of state. And in hindsight, I just kicked myself every day, because when I landed here as an intern and then at graduate school, like, this is home. I have more of a connection here, and did as well when I was in graduate school, with faculty at the University of Maine than I did at a much smaller liberal arts school. And this is just such a special spot, and everywhere I go, I can't speak highly enough about what the university has to offer, not just for students, but for Maine's marine economy in general. It's been a game changer for myself personally, and for our business as well. Our sales pitch when we go around the country and around the world is all about our collaborations with scientists here at the University of Maine, and how we're working on projects to improve our understanding and improve the sustainability of Maine's lobster industry. It's not about price or volume or any of that. It's all about the work that is being done in collaboration with scientists right here at UMaine.
And it's keeping it thriving into the future, for sure.
That's the key. It's been like that for generations, and we want to keep it that way, so that if my son or my daughter want to follow in my boots, if they so choose, we want to make sure that the resources are there for them to do that.
We talked about a lot of new products or fisheries or resources, everything from seaweed to scallops to mussels to oysters to eels. I know there's some work going on there. What might be the next one of those, or something else that's going to maybe really blossom and take off? Is there any?
Blue crabs?
Hopefully not. Hopefully not blue crabs. Yes.
Yeah, we have about 10 blue crabs right behind Kurt up there.
God.
So
I had the first year students down here for boot camp the week before classes started, and Everett took us out in one of the skiffs, and we pulled up a couple of traps, and we found a bunch of blue crabs. I couldn't believe it.
Really?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
fast.
No, that Maryland is known for blue crabs.
Correct.
Right, yeah.
They're not supposed to be here.
They're not supposed
No.
to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're beautiful looking. Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful.
And they're delicious, right?
Yep.
I mean,
They are delicious.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, but it's a whole other fishery, right? To think about. I will sort of go back to one. American eel. You mentioned it a couple of times. So Sarah Rademacher of American Unagi got her start right behind Kurt again at the Darling Marine Center and incubated. So one of the things we do here at the university is we incubate businesses. If someone has a business idea, so she was raising baby eels in the building right behind Kurt over here, and now is a 27,000 square foot facility growing eels in a recirculating aquaculture system in Waldoboro, right next door, right? So I think that's a fantastic story of R&D, right? Like moving through the university at a small scale, and then sort of jogging before you run at a full scale facility. The other one for me that I know I mentioned before, but is sea scallops. Is the opportunity for sea scallops to an aquaculture product. We already have the largest sea scallop aquaculture farms in the country that are one of them, the largest one in the state, and therefore I guess in the country, although it's small scale right now, is co-owned by someone who got their degree here at the Darling Marine Center too. In that case, it's been a lot about technology transfer. Can we figure out what Japan is doing right? Can we figure out what's happening in the Netherlands, and then bring that technology here and then share it with citizens that want to get into that kind of work?
Kurt, you talked about this a little bit, but anybody chime in? Maine's working waterfront and preserving that. Are there changes that are going to be unavoidable? You talked about coastal communities relying on those lobster fishers to keep the town going. But how many changes? What kind of changes are we seeing in these working waterfront towns?
Yeah, I mean, the working waterfront is really that nexus between what goes out on the water every single day, and harvesters and growers, and then the rest of the world. Those docks, those wharves are really that connection, and without them you lose that access and you lose that ability to bring those products to market. And there certainly are a number of different pressures that are having a potentially drastic negative impact on working waterfront. It's already very limited along the coast. I think it would scare most people to realize how little access there is along the coast of Maine. two of the biggest threats in my mind are gentrification, and once working waterfront is lost to private ownership, it's not coming back. And so preserving what we have is just as important as establishing new working waterfronts. And then another big threat that was really driven home, I think, to everybody along the coast was these massive storms that we're seeing in the wintertime. January 10th and January 13th, 2024 are two dates that people along the coast will never forget. We had two massive southeasters back to back. And you're used to hearing about nor'easters during the wintertime, but more and more we've seen these storms come out of the southeast, and most harbors along the coast of Maine are there because they're protected from wind out of the northeast. So as we see more and more winter wind out of the southeast, it really puts a lot of that working waterfront infrastructure in jeopardy. So climate change and big storms, I mean, did so much damage this past winter and will continue to do so. So thinking about how we build in a resilient way to face that going forward will definitely be key.
Chris, I'm sure the lobster fishermen you talk and fish, women, male and female,
Correct.
talk about that and worry about access and being priced out of the town.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the housing and the lack of the losing of the waterfronts that's the crisis right now, and that's all along the coast, and we can't lose any more of our working waterfronts because each wharf, even if privately owned, generally supports a number of fishermen. When I fished, I had the benefit of a family that just let me use their wharf because they were that community spirited, but that's pretty rare.
Right.
But so we're really, it's really kind of that scary limited access issue. But to talk about the storms, that was the second storm just happened to coincide to the day before the U.S.-Canada Lobster Town meeting last year, which is the Lobster Institute hosted event annually, and it half of the fishermen that were supposed to come and be speakers could not attend because their wharves were wiped out. Commissioner Kelleher couldn't attend because he had to go into triage mode to take care of what was going on in the state, and it was just this catastrophic event of making us wake up, or anybody that was denying like this wasn't happening was really aware after that. And that just, if you think of a few wharves, but if you take away the wharves, then that's the only infrastructure where you can get your bait, your fuel, you can schlep your lobsters across the dock where a truck can come up. There was whole communities where that was not an option. You have to go to the next peninsula just to sell. And if you think of, if you're already crowded as they are, pack those people all in at the end of a day on a busy August afternoon, really it starts to affect all of the supply chain and how those communities work. So it's just with more and more of that type of weather activity, it really enlightens us how narrowly we're coping.
And it's such a hyper-local fishery, and it may sound simple just to go to the next peninsula with your boat, but you fish where you're from, and that next peninsula over might be the far side of the moon for most people. And so packing up and going somewhere else is a really hard option.
Weege, I wanted to circle back with you for these marine science students. What kind of careers can they go into? Where are you seeing the graduates from UMaine going out and making a difference?
Great question. But first, I want to interject. Just sitting here and listening to all this, one of the things I love about this, debates about is the Gulf of Maine warming, cooling. How long is that trend for versus moving into this trend? Issues with fisheries. These are the people that are educating our students. So I just like to say that our students are getting all these things that we're talking about right here. These are the hot topics. We've got 25 faculty that are doing research all over the world, and this is what our faculty are bringing to the classroom. So it's just exciting for me to sit here as I don't do research anymore, I'm an administrator, but just to continue to be part of these debates and see that our students benefit from all this is amazing. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that we couldn't do this in a vacuum. Like, we are able to do all this work with our collaborations up and down the coast, whether it's with our satellite campuses of the university, but also with our nonprofits that are doing really good work in this space of addressing the working waterfront issues. So Maine Center for Coastal Fisheries, the Allen Institute, and others, it's really, we're all working with them, and I think the students benefit of seeing all of that collaboration that's happening here in the state. We're really fortunate.
It's the main way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So to go back to your original question, what do our students do once they graduate? And as I'm doing recruiting to high school students, and a lot of parents are like, yeah, but can you actually get a job in this field? And I always say, tons of job security for the wrong reasons. We talked about climate change, all these problems that we're facing, and so this is a major about our planet. So things like earth and climate sciences, environmental science, marine science. We're concerned about what's happening to our planet. We're seeing a lot of changes, and we need bright young people to continue to come up through the educational system and to address these problems. This is a field where graduate education is a big part of it, so we're constantly trying to prepare our students to work hard, get good grades. We joked about calculus, but we have a demanding curriculum. We want our students to take chemistry, physics, calculus, all the different areas in marine science, because we want them to be prepared for whatever's next. So a big number of our students, probably a quarter of a graduating class, will go directly on to graduate school. A couple might stay at UMaine, but they're going all over the country. We did a survey about 10 years ago of all our alums at the time, and we found that approximately 50% of the students that responded to our survey had either gone to graduate school or were in graduate school. So the number I throw out there is that approximately half our students are going on to graduate school. Fisheries observer for NOAA. So there are a couple of companies out there that contract to NOAA to go out on commercial vessels and do fisheries observing work, which is required for the boats that are bringing in commercial catches. So that's an interesting field for our students to go directly from a bachelor's degree, get some time on the water, get some experience, and many students will go out and work first and then decide they want to go to graduate school. We've got students that, the dream is to work at an aquarium and work with dolphins and whales or whatever. So we have a lot of students that are going into what I would call some form of education and outreach. We've had students go to vet school. We've had students go to medical school. So one of our faculty members says marine science is just a really cool major to trick students into getting an education. So part of what our students do is just go and do other things in life too, which is absolutely fine. So our students really do lots of different things, and it is an exciting time for this field. There are lots of opportunities. Our 25 faculty on average will bring in anywhere from $7 to $10 million a year. Which is, I think, more than most departments, if not all the departments at the University of Maine. So this is an active area where the federal government is putting money into this, and that represents opportunity for students. Yeah.
That's great.
And single-handedly employing the positions at the Department of Marine Resources. A
Yeah,
lot of our graduate students.
Yeah, I think if you look at many of those people have either a bachelor's or a bachelor's and a master's from the University of Maine. Yep.
So as we think about starting to wrap up, we'd like to ask this question no matter what the topic we're talking about. Looking out 5 or 10 years, what do you think we'll see? What do you hope we'll see? What are some of the changes that are underway now that maybe will really be very prominent at that point? Maybe, Damien, let's start with you. And is offshore wind part of that equation?
I'll tell you on October 29th, there will be an auction for about 8 areas inside the Gulf of Maine. And so I'll be very curious. And I should mention, right, this is the week of Afloat, which is America's Floating Offshore Wind Conference that the University of Maine leads and was just held in Portland this week. So I was just down there. So on October 29th, I'll let you know. It depends on how those lease blocks go, how much money they go for. But and to sort of add to what Weege was saying, one of the things I tell my students too is also to think, I think there's more room for entrepreneurs that have a marine science background probably than ever before. Environmental consulting, because if offshore wind is going to happen, we are going to require surveys for North Atlantic right whale, for marine birds, for fisheries, and to understand what the potential interaction between offshore wind and fisheries are going to look like. Because I think we've made a really, really good case today to talk about how important the lobster fishery is. So the lobster fishery has to be able to happen even while we switch to renewable energy, right? Because the lobster is also susceptible to climate change, right? So we have to figure out how to balance those things. And that, I think, is where I see a lot of the future happening, right? Is students that come in with an entrepreneurial mindset that are trying to do things sustainably and trying to sort of keep the future moving along while also, embracing what our cultural heritage is here. Yeah.
5 or 10 years down the road, who wants to take a crack at it? You will hopefully still be catching lobsters. What else do you think will be happening at that point?
I get that question a lot from a lot of our customers around the country and around the world, and I always joke that I dropped my crystal ball overboard about 5 years ago. Haven't found it since, but predicting that far out within this industry is challenging. We just had the Lobster Institute convened a meeting, I think it was in June, and it was out of concern that the price of lobster had dropped substantially, and everyone was concerned about the upcoming season for lobster and low prices. Here we are at the end of September, and prices are as high this year at the end of September as they ever have been. So there is a lot of uncertainty and unpredictability in this industry by nature, and I think that really speaks to the importance of a diversity of opportunities along the coast in the blue economy. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm very confident that our lobster fishery will be just fine, but the more we can diversify what's coming out of the ocean and ending up on dinner plates or biopharmaceuticals or whatever it is around the world, the better off this entire marine economy will be.
I would add that the more science industry partnerships that we can expand and take advantage of, as I would say, the platform that is the Gulf of Maine, where all of those lobster traps are. And there are so many fishermen that are interested and willing to participate because they have a vested interest, but also they're interested in being a part of the conversation and a part of helping decide what is being studied. And they just have, as you said, fishermen are scientists, and they're getting their own PhD as they learn their bottom. And I just can't hope enough that we continue to have a healthy enough fishery that we can expand a lot of the research projects that we're currently doing, and always keeping in mind to do that with the industry in collaboration. And I hope, I'm wildly optimistic always, that with further conservation efforts that we will remain healthy and but also be proactive at the same time.
I'll second that. That industry science collaboration is so key. And to speak about opportunities, there's a lot of opportunities in the private sector as well for graduates of this system, myself included. Our business wouldn't be where it is right now had it not been for our collaborations with the university, and that's just so important.
Well, yeah, one more thing. It's so exciting about, like, we've been able to connect with the Lobster Institute with our affiliated faculty at UMaine. We have so many faculty, or at least the Lobster Institute works with about 34 various faculty across all the departments, and the innovation that's coming out of using lobster shells, because they were just trying to look for soil remediation and hooking up with Kurt, and Kurt bringing shells and starting small, and it's grown to be really beneficial big industry, and it will hopefully go that way with composites, also using lobster shells, and how that's a value added to the industry that whoever thought of the waste shells being valuable. So it just there's so much going on, and it's so exciting, that sort of innovation and the ability to work together.
It's so much opportunity for these folks with chemistry backgrounds.
Yes.
Right. Weege, we'll give you the final word. For what do you see for the future for the School of Marine Science at UMaine, and then just big picture?
I guess I've been in this job for over 20 years now, and I feel like we have really built a phenomenal undergraduate and graduate program in marine sciences. And I think the university has supported us, the admissions office supports us, doing this podcast, communications and marketing supports us, the College of Earth, Life and Health. So I think for me, what I want to see in the next 5 years is that the university continues to support the School of Marine Sciences at the level it has, so we can continue to do all these things. Because I feel like we're at a very high level nationally, and I think just maintaining that is what I would like to see for another 5 years, 10 years, whatever, another 20.
Well, thank you so much. I don't know if I want to leave. I just want to hang out here the rest of the day.
I want a boat to go by and give us those rocking waves.
All right, there we go.
Take a nap.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can find all of our episodes on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and of course our YouTube channel. If you have questions or comments, send them along to Maine Question at maine.edu. We'll catch you next time on the Maine Question.